Okay, we'll call the November 16th Airport Commission meeting to order. Roll call.
Neil Johnson,
Here.
Greg Collier. Here. Andrew Barker,
Here.
Joel Gardner, Steve Smith,
Here.
Bill Schoonover, Greg Willoughby.
Here.
October minutes. Do I hear a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Here a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Audience, anyone have anything to say? Come right on, Tommy. You got, we kind of limit people to 45 minutes.
Yes, won't, I'll try to hold it in for 45 minutes. But my name's Tommy Lee. I'm at the Springdale Airport. I've got a little business at Venture Flight Aviation. Ever since I started that, I'm not an airport bum anymore. I'm a guy on the airport with a business. But I've had something that's been pretty exciting to me that I've been keeping track of the last couple of years, that it felt everything came to a point and I felt like I'd like to talk about it. Electric airplanes, which I initially looked on with some skepticism, obviously, but as of April, there was a big company, Zunim Aero, and Boeing and JetBlue both signed up with them and poured a ton of money into it. And from everything, I bought stock in a few little businesses, I think, they're privately owned, so can't invest in them, but JetBlue's probably not a bad thing if this is successful. And they're producing hybrid airplanes. And these hybrid airplanes, all once like hybrid cars, it extended the range. And you know, one of the advantages of a hybrid airplane is that initially on takeoff, you have to have large amounts of reserve power to get the airplane up to altitude. And then from then on, you don't need that much power anymore. You just go over into cruise mode, and they operate much more efficiently at altitude, not using much power. But this electricity gives them a boost to that altitude. And then they cruise along on, right now, Jet A's, the hybrids are going to use, but we can see hydrogen. We can see a lot of other fuels in the future that will just wean them completely off of hydrocarbons and give them a zero carbon footprint, you know. So I don't know if I believe in carbon footprints and stuff, but it's a nice buzzword. It makes businesses successful. So anyway, I went along and I thought this Zunim's coming out, and these airplanes will be about 26 seats. They will cruise. They'll be bad, pokey little things. They'll cruise at about 330 knots. But they're designed for like 200-mile trips and up to maybe 700 miles in the future, 200, 300, 400, like that. And they're going to change the whole dynamics of air travel into where it's going to be point to point, much more so now than the hub and spoke system. And these things, the big thing is 8 cents per seat mile. That may be widely optimistic, and that's direct cost, doesn't include cost of money, doesn't include taxes and all of that, or profits. But that would equate to about $12 direct cost per seat for a trip to Little Rock. Now, if that's not a game changer, I don't know what is. So we're talking about something that I've been enthusiastic about, and I didn't really think how that would affect the Springdale Airport, but I think it's going to be a big deal. I've always felt that the Springdale Airport had great advantages compared to all the other airports. We're more or less at the geographic and demographic center of Northwest Arkansas. Everybody's really close to us, and this point-to-point air is all about door-to-door. From the time you walk out of your door of your house till you get in the door of the business or other place you're visiting. So with our proximity to all the people will be a lot closer to the airport. And this is even made better by the fact that Highway 265 is getting 4-lane down through there. The new bypass is going to intersect 65. It's going to make it much more accessible to everybody in Northwest Arkansas to get to Northwest Arkansas Airport. So I've thought about it. I've really gotten excited about it since Boeing and JetBlue dumped a bunch of money on these people, because you and I all know that it's not Bernoulli, it's money that makes airplanes fly. And it looks like they're going to have a really big supply of money to make this work. So I've thought about it a long time, and of course, you know how I am. I've talked about it, and I'm excited about it, and I think it's going to be great for general aviation. But exactly how will this affect the Springdale Airport? Well, I think we're in an ideal place to be the go-to place for these point-to-point operations. These aircraft require about 2,500 feet for takeoff. That makes our 5,000 feet just look like a Lord's plenty. So, and I think that's going to give us some great advantages compared to, say, Fayetteville, which has weather issues, Rogers, which is, you know, it's out of the way up north of everybody. So I'm thinking that I'm enthusiastic about it. I'd like to see everybody enthusiastic about it and sort of plan 2022 when they expect these new aircraft to be operational. I think that's optimistic, but say it's 2024. We're talking about it 6 years away. And that gives us very little time to plan the Springdale Airport, because if we wait till it actually happens, we can kiss that goodbye. You know, there's no way, if you, instead of planning, if you're just reacting to it, somebody else will get this thing. It looked like this new Surf Air at Bentonville. It's a commuter aircraft, and they're basing it at Bentonville. I think Springdale would be a lot better place for it, but they didn't ask me. But right now, I think that we're in a position, when I say we, friends of the Springdale Airport, which I like to include myself as one of, you know, we're at a time we could start planning and make this thing really happen. That when this happens, we could be the little point-to-point hub for all of Northwest Arkansas, which would be great for the city, and great for the airport, and I'm all about that. So it boils down to I needs a good friend of mine and a good friend of the Springdale Airport. Larry Owens came by and talked to me, and he said, boy, I heard they're building new fire stations, like 3 in Springdale. I said, well, yeah, I've read something that we're building. He said, well, why don't they put one on the Springdale Airport there north of my old hangar, and that way, before we could have 121 scheduled service, well, we'd have to have some kind of fire suppression on the airport. So I thought, if we're building a fire station anyway, and Larry told me, he said, why don't you go to the airport commission, talk to them about putting a fire station on the field if they have an idea about where they can place it, and that would really help the airport out. And then I combine it with what I've been reading about these electric airplanes and the chance we could have 121 scheduled service. You know, that's not something now because our runway's not big enough for those big airplanes, so we'd never have scheduled service. But with these little airplanes, it becomes a distinct possibility and a real, you know, opportunity there for Springdale to grow and really do something as far as the airport's concerned. So I thought that fire suppression would be a good part. Try to do more promotion of the airport, maybe a website or some more work to try to already start thumping our tub and saying this is what we'd like to do, and we're the go-to guys for you people to do it with. So I thought promotional work, maybe the fire station, which we'd really have to do this, and then work on the 260. I know we're talking about buying property and stuff. If we had an entrance off of 265 where people could enter the airport, I think that would be a great thing for this. Well, that's all I've got, that and optimism, and so I appreciate y'all listening to me. Good day.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Operations report. James?
We've got, Patrick Cameron bought the old Pinnacle hangars down there off of Cottle Street, those 3. So he's going to be moving out of 1401, so we're going to be renting that and the office on Powell Street. So I have that for rent for December. Then I've got a few people that I'm going to be talking to Sarah about. She's already working on Gary Howard. I turned her on to him last meeting. I've got a new sign coming from D-Sign, because that one that tore completely in two. So they're supposed to push that out before I can get it attached. And
Are we gonna, you're gonna attach it to the fence, or?
no, I've already got the post set, so as soon as that sign comes in, we're gonna frame it up and put it up nice.
What'd you say happened
The wind ripped it.
after it was up?
Yep, just ripped it off the fence.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, the one that was on the fence?
Yeah, it's the
Yep.
one that was directly
Oh.
south, so it got that full blunt of that high wind and ripped it.
It didn't have ventilation to it, did it?
No.
It was solid.
So we're attaching it to 4x8 sheets of plywood painted and hanging it back up framed. It should be solid when we're done.
He plan on putting some maintenance in those buildings, or just gonna be hangar space, and he gonna rent out hangar space, or what's it?
He's going to operate one himself and then sublease the other two. I think Sam's is going to keep one for his maintenance shop.
Okay? I just wondered if it would affect us on our rentals. If it would,
No, because the people's already in, it's going to stay in it.
okay. I got you. Any question, James? What about our tower dead zone? Did we talk about that? I know I was confused. Some of you may not have been here last week, but Dave was bringing to our attention, I think we've known it for some time. For some reason, we have a audio dead spot in front of the terminal building. It's not a visual, it's actually the radios. And that should not be hard to take care of or hard to detect, in my opinion, because it's just simply radio, and it's so close. There's something somebody's missing. Anybody have any ideas who we might could get to look at that? Have you explored that? Anyone that can do it?
Well, I've spoke to Larry, who is our tower maintenance guy, and there's an antenna out there for like $4,000. The FAA had one, but they can't find it. We was going to borrow it to see, rather than spending money and buying one and it not fix the problem. Larry has switched the receivers from ground to tower because the ground frequency picks up just fine, but it still does the same. It's the frequency issue, not the receiver.
It's in their radio, maybe.
Nope, it's in the receipt. It's in the
It's in what?
frequency.
It's in the frequency?
It's something
Not-
to do with the way the
Yeah.
frequency interacts with the buildings and
Not
whatnot.
all aircraft has the problem. So it's just a
So
certain
it's
view.
whether they're at the limits.
It's the tower that usually can't hear the aircraft.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, that's what it is?
Right.
So you can
once they
sit on the ramp
taxi
and
away
call
from
on
the building-
18.2 and they can't hear you.
once
Well,
they
I
taxi away-
understand that if you happen to be on the same side of the tolerance, the frequency, that can happen. Whereas if you're opposite sides, it will work, or if you're right in the middle.
It happens.
Is that
in-
right?
It happens, from my experience, it happens in most aircraft on the ramp. I'd say way more than half
Oh, it does?
that are sitting out in just wherever the blind spot is. Yeah, yeah. Happens in all of my airplanes. And most of Summit's airplanes.
If you
as
took
well.
a handheld out there and just check another frequency quickly and see if
Well,
you got
the
that
ground
problem.
ground seems to
Ground
work,
works
but
fine.
we don't ever really use ground.
Well,
Tower
I
fixes
realize
ground up
that.
everywhere.
Well, all I was saying is
Where is it?
the easiest fix might be requesting a different
Where is
frequency.
it? I never noticed it when I was flying because I never stopped at the terminal. But,
Well, I
always
rarely do,
taxi
so
without
I'm with you.
so do you have to be in front of the terminal?
Yep.
You can't, out on the ramp, it won't do it. It's just,
The further out from the terminal, they pick them up. So usually what the tower tells them is, I can't hear you, pull on out, and I'll pick you up closer to the taxiway.
And they might not be in sight there as well, because the terminal creates a blind spot visually. So they usually just tell them, taxi until you can see the tower, and then I'll
Right.
be able to talk to you.
Which the tower doesn't control the ramp anyway, they just control the movement areas.
so we have a problem. What we're gonna do about it, and do we have any, what's our options for a fix at
Don't
this
know.
point?
I mean, Larry Caldwell told me we could buy a $4,000 antenna and it still not fix the problem.
Well, that's not very encouraging.
No, so I don't know.
Is there a repeater?
Nope, he said there's nothing for the frequency that you could put on it that would change that. And that's our tower guy that maintains all of our
And
equipment.
we changed tower frequency. Why we
Changed
do
the
that?
frequency,
Why we look at
we
that?
switched it with the ground and it still did the same.
But, I mean, technically speaking, if everyone operated using the ground frequency like we're supposed to, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Do what now?
It's only the tower frequency that has it, it's not ground.
Right.
And ground operations are supposed to be handled on ground, it's just there's one guy and he
Right,
monitors both
right,
frequencies
right,
anyway,
right.
and he transmits
Wouldn't be
on
a
both
problem if
frequencies
everybody did
always.
what they were supposed to.
If everyone followed the letter of the rules and used ground on ground, then we would never run
You
into
use
it.
tower frequency for ground.
Right.
Is there any way we can put an advisory on that, or
Good.
huh?
Could just tell the tower guys to
Signage or
start
whatever?
implementing it.
What about a sign right out there where people can sit in the front yard for a while to
Well,
be sure and
if you
use?
don't live here, if you don't belong here, you'll use ground because you'll see it in the charts and that'll be the way you go. But those of us that live here just use the tower frequency because, well, it's
That's what I
easier.
always did.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
So
the
if
people-
we could,
the
we could
people that
literally
live-
ask the tower guys, hey, start asking people to use the ground frequency, and then we won't have the dead spot issue, and it won't cost anything.
well, okay, let's take this into consideration. Dave is the one that brought it up. And I'm sure then a lot of the students and stuff, are doing that. In the short term, till we come up with a fix, could we not just put a simple sign out there and use use ground frequency for ground operations?
Put a sign out.
Huh?
Put a sign out there.
Then they stand there, sit there and talk all day, and they'll get the tower, and then finally figure out how to switch it.
Or you could just say, have a sign that says, contact ground before entering the taxiway. It's a movement area and the ramp isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can move on the rim. Maybe we don't have a problem. Maybe we just need to educate people at this point.
Does the tower always monitor ground?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, they have to.
It's always there, just like the tower frequency.
Yep. They always monitor ground and they transmit on both.
Let's try to get the word out there if most of it's local.
Well, I'll just start using ground. We can ask Summit if they want to start using ground and,
They should teach their students to use it. Pardon me?
It's out by the
The tie-down
taxiway.
area.
out by the taxiway anyway.
That's
yeah.
where it's at?
No, that's where their planes are.
Oh, so they work.
They hear fine out there.
Sometimes,
Okay.
sometimes.
Well,
A lot of times I can sit out there in front of my hangar.
Yep.
Talk to the tower just fine. I don't know if it's atmospheric conditions or whatever, and one day I'll go out there and call them.
but what we're saying though, Tommy, is ground operation, you should be using ground anyway.
Do you ever
I
use,
would-
Tommy, do you ever use ground?
What I would do, I'd say we don't,
Tells you, parking with me,
Yep.
park with me.
I'd tell my
Yeah.
I'd tell my students, hey, you go out there, use ground. That's what you're supposed to do anyway, to give you some practice.
Well, so it wouldn't even be problematic if we stayed with ground, or stayed with tower taxiing in, because you don't need to ever talk to them again once you're clear of the movement area anyway.
Yeah, just advise them, if you're not getting tower on the ground, go to ground frequency, you get out and down the end of the runway. Okay. Airport activity, Wyman?
We've set a record of operations the last 9 months in a row compared to the last 4 years. Activity at the airport is continuing to grow and continuing to stay high. Income statement is on the next page. Shows that for the year, we've cleared about $48,000. I've looked back into records to see who we used 10 years ago when we acquired the Sequoia Engineering property to review those appraisals.
Yes.
And I located the firm, they're still in Little Rock, and they still do review appraisals, and I've sent them an email asking them to furnish us a quote or an estimate on what they charged, but I hadn't got a response back yet.
So you hadn't talked about time frame or anything till we get the dollar amount. Everybody understand that, what we're talking about as far as having to have the second appraisal on the property?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for this has been fairly time consuming for Wyman. He's been riding herd on this appraisal, and I want to personally thank him for it.
Got one more appraisal back. You've got a report in there that shows, I think we numbered it number 7.
Yeah.
Total right now is $876,000.
Where are we at with totals right now after they got have we seen, huh?
876.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Is that all of them but the one corner left?
Law office.
Okay,
We had our initial,
that's
our Cursor appraisal was right on the money,
pretty good.
pretty much. Our initial. Any questions on land acquisition at this point? We're simply at the appraisal stage, the first appraisal, and then we will need the second. I don't know at what point we go ask the realtor to go present this. I don't know at what point.
Well, there's some information on relocation and stuff like that that you got to provide to the property owner when you go make that first visit.
Right.
And I've talked to Mike with Garver, and they have some expertise in this area. So after we get the review appraisal, I'd like to sit down again and talk about how to approach them and the information we've got to provide them when we have to give them a copy of the appraisal and basically tell them what their rights are under the acquisition and everything to make sure we comply with that. So I would like to entertain the idea of hiring someone to help with that acquisition to make sure that we comply with the requirements all the way through.
That answers my question. When do we contact them? So we've got to have the second appraisals,
Right, we got to have that
appraisal
review
review and
appraisal
everything like
first.
that done. And then we'll look into what all requirements we have and make sure we meet it, and then make the presentation.
Wouldn't the city attorney have that information, Wyman? Instead of hiring somebody?
Not current on all the requirements. So when the city does it, we hire a property acquisition company specifically to handle
Oh.
that.
So we can't use
That's good.
history.
Now, he can handle condemnation if we have to go to condemnation.
Okay.
But as far as the relocation costs, the relocation requirements and stuff like that,
Well, I can,
There isn't a history. I guess what I'm saying is, based on recent things that the city has done,
we have,
use that as a history so we'd know without spending
the
money.
history would be that they hired outside help.
We know what the outside help did, right?
No,
I wonder if a good title company attorney couldn't walk through that and understand it.
that's part of it. Right after we do the review appraisal, we'll have to have a title search done.
Oh, yeah, that has to be done. Okay, well, so right now, we're on track. I mean, we're doing everything we can at this point. So we'll take it a step at a time. This was a short period between the last meeting because I'd postponed it a week, but we've got 4 weeks. Do we need any action today that would move us forward, or we,
No, we're still waiting on that one appraisal and then,
Okay.
the quote to do the review appraisals.
so nothing until next meeting? Everybody good with that? Okay. Let's talk about the restaurant. We're not eating yet there, are we?
No, but gave them permission and cleared it with Neil to pour a pad on the south side of the terminal building to put a smoker there where things smoke the meat.
This is the same couple that we initially.
From
Yep.
Huntsville.
Right.
Yep.
So they're working toward that. They're going to pay the cost of.
When does
the
Bill
connection.
supposed to be out? Are we not there?
Into this month.
December 1st.
By the
December
end,
the
by the end
1st.
of November.
But I thought he had said that he would be out in the middle of November.
He said the 15th, but he was up there the other day, and I talked to him. He said he pushed it out to the 20th. He'll be out the 20th.
That's just,
So the first.
Yeah.
yeah, 20th is, what's the date?
16th,
That's next Tuesday or
Oh, no.
something.
15th?
16th.
20th Monday.
The notification we sent him gave him till November 30th.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get a restaurant, looks like.
They're excited.
Garver, Adam, you got a update for us?
All right, I got a couple updates for you. Sorry I couldn't make it last month. I appreciate James covering for me with some information.
By
I
the
gave
way,
him.
tell us about that. Did you have another
I did. Another boy. So
boy?
2 Rugrats at the house now.
You're going to be professionals, that on.
My wife is. I just try to help when I can. But
Congratulations.
thank you.
anyway.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it. So a couple things going on. We'll start with the Runway 36 Pappy project first. Since I last saw you about a month and a half ago, we have executed the construction contract with Broadway Electric. They were the low bidder coming out of Forest City, Arkansas. We've been working with them on submittals. We have just about everything approved other than some minor stuff. That's not long lead time. We also received the Pappies. Is that last week, James, when those came in?
Yes.
Okay, last week. One of our engineers already came by and verified all the components we got. I went by today to verify the spare parts, make sure we got everything we were supposed to get. We'll get Rose the okay to go ahead and pay that invoice this afternoon, make sure we have everything we're supposed to have. With games coming up over the next 2 weekends, we've been talking with the contractor, looking at either early to mid-December to get these installed or right after the Jan 1 New Year's holiday. Just depends on weather, how things look, and we're still missing some cans that are on a long lead time that he procured that we're waiting to get in. So just how those things fall is going to determine when we do them, but I'll work with Suzanne, obviously, and James, and as a reminder, I believe that's up to 10 night closures to get everything done. We expect it to go faster than that because he's actually going to prefab the foundations at his shop and then just set them in the ground when he gets here. So those are all good things. Any questions on that project? And as a reminder, that was an ADA grant that we have that's funding that, so you're only covering 10% of that project cost, around $100,000 total, so $10,000 on y'all's side, roughly. The other project is our FAA project. It's the runway, what we call the runway pavement and lighting rehab project, because it includes both the rehab of the runway, also all the taxiway connectors up to the hold lines, and a lighting rehab, which would also include a new electrical vault on the airfield. So since we last talked, we have completed all the geotech. We got our geotech report back about 4 or 5 weeks ago. We sent that off to our non-destructive testing subconsultant who did all that testing. They have churned that, and we expect that report next week. From all the preliminary information, looking at the fleet mix, looking at what we have out there right now, there are parts of the runway where we could use a little bit more asphalt, and so I'm 95% sure we're going to be a straight overlay as far as our rehab goes, as opposed to a mill and fill where you end up at the same elevation. We'll probably go up a couple inches in elevation, which isn't that big of a deal because we got to transition out into our taxiways anyway to rehab those. So that will affect our construction safety and phasing a little bit. Our hope or our plan is that we will come to you in December at that meeting and be able to provide you with our construction safety plans, our closure time frames. We will do this in a couple phases. Everything outside the runway safety areas we'll do while the runway's open, but we'll have to obviously close it down to do all of our work on the runway. So we'll have some good time frames for what those look like. When we did this year at another airport in the area, we actually procured the bids one summer, and by the time you get the FAA grant, you're in the fall time frame, and by the time you're ready to start construction, it's November. And so with that project, we actually opened bids one summer and built it the next summer. We will more than likely recommend to you all we do the same thing, just to try to really hammer that closure period as short as possible. Make sure we're doing it at a time where historically we have good hot days. If we do get a rain event, we're not sitting on our hands for a couple days. So anyway, that's all looking 6 months to a year ahead of us here. But we'll have some more information as that goes in December, with some more firm plans for you. We are talking to the contractor community about unique ways to do the rehab to, again, minimize the time we're on the runway. Not give up any sort of performance of the asphalt or the product, but what can we do to increase speed? So that's what's going on there. No major issues is that. We're still proceeding as planned. The one thing I did want to show you today is you should all have a sheet in front of you. Looks like this. I passed this along to Suzanne, the tower, and James about 3 weeks ago. With this project, like I said, it also includes lighting rehab, a new vault, and a lot of taxiway signage on both sides of the runway. This project will include all of our runway exit signage on both sides and hold line signage on both sides. And then obviously once we get to our East Taxiway project in a few years, that will include some more signage on the east side and lighting, but probably about 30 new signs on the airport. So with that, we had to come up with a plan for naming all of our taxiways. So what we've done is we've taken the FAA standard for taxiway naming, which is relatively new. And so this configuration on the bottom here, which is our proposed naming convention, may look odd at first, but this is the way it's being implemented across the country now. The big thing that jumps out is you would have a parallel taxiway like Alpha, but then all the taxiway connectors, instead of being Charlie, Delta, Echo, they're Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3, Alpha 4. So it's just a little bit different than what the FAA used to do back in the early 2000s with taxiway naming. So I wanted to present this to you, get your feedback from it. We've gotten some feedback from the tower, and then Suzanne and James seem to be okay with the plan moving forward. But really the biggest things we can change to still be within FAA standards would be, we can choose which parallel taxi we want to be Alpha and which one we want to be Bravo. I mean, if you want it to be Zulu and Tango, you could as well, but Alpha and Bravo are usually the first ones chosen. And then which way do you want to start the numbering? We show it north to south. That's usually what typically is done. You can go south to north if you want, but it's really up to you. So unless y'all have any comments, we're going to proceed as shown here, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about the naming first, and then we'll get to some of the red stuff on here as well.
Alpha and Bravo is always a good pick.
From an operations standpoint, it's easier.
I will be so happy to have something other than east and west.
Yeah.
You want an Echo and whiskey, is that what you
How about we can get some money from someone and call them Tango and Foxtrot?
All right. Yeah, and we chose Alpha for
not a joke.
the west side because we see that as the home field. It's got the terminal on it. That would be Alpha. Bravo is the east side. Right now it's really the secondary parallel taxiway because it doesn't go full length. So we'll proceed in that nature. A couple other things on this diagram. We'll start with the little red hatched area close to Alpha 4. That would be pavement removal. Alpha 4 is the taxiway that has the big bump on it. I know that the JB Hunt folks have talked about having some issues with that bump. It needs to be rehabbed to fix the bump. Unfortunately, the FAA sees that taxiway as what we call direct access to the runway, meaning you can go from the ramp to the runway without making any turns on that taxiway, and they see that as an unsafe condition. So they would require us, if we rehab A4, to remove the direct access, which can be done by removing A4, or it can be done by removing the apron ahead of A4. That way you actually have to make a turn to get to A4. That is our recommendation to you. We run through that with Suzanne and James and Tower. I think most of the people that actually utilize A4 to go straight across would be our full trucks, so it may affect them the most. It will take out a few tie downs, but actually those tie downs right there aren't even marked because they weren't used very much anyway. So won't have a huge effect on parking operations. We may lose one or two more tie down areas, but again, we have a lot of other tie downs on other parts of the apron. So any comments on that? Okay. At this point, it's either we do that or we don't get to rehab A4, and I don't think that's a good option either.
A4 is the one that needs the rehab the worst.
Yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
Most used.
Yeah, for sure.
The last thing is, you can see there's one taxiway connector in red that I did not show with the name on. This is really a toss-up here. From talking with James, Suzanne, and Mike, it would be that is a seldom used taxiway. If you think about it operationally, landing on 3-6, I mean, it's only another couple hundred feet to get to Alpha 3. If you land on 18 and take off the runway there, you have landed quite short of your touchdown or aiming point markers, so it'd be a quick off the runway there, probably not used very often. the reason we show as potentially removing it, the cost to remove it's about $4 a yard. The cost to rehab is about $20 a yard. And so anytime we do something like this, we like to look at the whole airfield. Do we have excess payments? And sometimes we don't like to get rid of excess payment. In this situation, though, I thought it was worth bringing up to, is that taxiway worth keeping, or should we just remove it? And then it's cheaper to remove it now than to rehab it, and we don't have to keep rehabbing it if it's not being used very often. So I wanted to open up to the commission and get your thoughts on it.
I vote remove it.
I'd remove it.
Lots of times I don't plow it in the wintertime because it's hardly ever used.
It's
I have
very
other things to
rarely
plow.
used. I mean, honestly, the only folks I could see that might
It's
want to
just too
talk about
close
it
to
would be
that other
Summit.
one, there's no
Yeah.
sense.
If they have students that use that in their taxi back
I
operations,
don't
would be
even
the
know why
only
it's
thing I would
there.
think
I don't
of.
know when we built it.
The only thing I can think of is maybe when, the runway stopped at Alpha 3 way back when, it was a good other exit point. But now that the runway's extended, it's really kind of a no man's land, and it doesn't get you across the runway either. So, yeah.
I want to remove it just for the symmetry.
As an engineer, I agree. It does bother me.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, we also show the future taxiway, that should say Bravo extension, expansion, not taxiway Alpha expansion. What we'll do in the interim is we'll keep, there won't be a Bravo 1, Bravo 2 when we finish up. Those just be held out, and then they'll be installed. Those signs will be installed once we do the east taxiway work. All right. If y'all concur with that, that's what our approach will be. We'll move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I have a question. Since the extension's on here, last week or last month, the city proposed to us of diversion ponds on that east side of the new Bravo. Do you have any feelings from an engineering safety standpoint of that happening?
You mean detention ponds where we're currently showing the east taxiway expansion?
Yeah,
In the blue area?
And they would come up right, almost, what they were proposing would come up right next to that taxiway.
Yeah, I know, me and James, we talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago. The comments we had, which, just for one, anytime you build ponds on an airport, you think of bird attractants. And so there are some specific requirements to even build a pond on an airport. You have to have it dry in, I believe, 36 hours after the rain event. It must be dry. And so that's one thing. Obviously, the second thing is we don't, with grading requirements next to a taxiway, I wouldn't want to put anything up there that's going to make it harder for us to build in the future. Number three, that's really not a good spot to be digging a whole lot, because I think there's a landfill that was up there at one point in time. So
Right.
we're already planning in our estimates to do a lot of B-stone work in that area to stabilize it before we come in with our
Okay.
pavement section, because we know it's not good soil.
We have enough birds already.
Yeah. And I haven't heard anything since we sent that email. James, have you seen anything else about it?
No.
Okay.
I think Brad said he's looking at the other side because he can't put one over a landfill. Wasn't that what he said?
Yeah, I think he said that wasn't something they wanted to get into, the environmental
Okay, I
headache.
hadn't heard that because
Yeah.
I didn't like that over there
Yeah.
personally.
And on the on the ALD, we do have the master plan that you could have a regional detention area way off the 3-6 end in the corner of the property, right where 412 is. But again, that's a whole different drainage basin. The runways kind of goes each way from the middle of the runway, either north or south. And so, yeah, I always heard the drainage stuff was on the south end was the bad stuff, but it sounded like he was more worried about the north end.
Well, I think they're worried about draining downtown Springdale over here.
Yeah. I think we squashed it.
Okay. That's what I wanted. Because I didn't think it was a good idea. But I wanted some justification for my thinking other than I didn't think it was a good idea.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments from our old business? Comments from commissioners? If not, we'll be adjourned.